Hare Krishna, everyone who is here. Um, so, today we will continue with our Vaishnava Etiquette course. This is week number 7, 7 of 8. And we will, if you're following along in the manual, then we're on, we're on we're page 68 in the manual if you're following that way. And if you're watching online, then you'll see the same thing in our PowerPoint presentation. And before we go start on this, we mentioned that we have one more class coming up, but instead of being next Wednesday, which is Lord Balaram's appearance day, or the week after that, which is Janmashtami, around that, then we'll schedule, but it'll be sometime after Janmashtami, the number 8 class for this Vaishnava Etiquette course. That'll be the final one. Okay, so we'll start. If you're watching the manual, it's page 68, 4 regulative principles, very important part of our sadhana. The 4 regulative principles. One must strictly follow the 4 regulative principles. And what are those? No meat eating, including fish and eggs. We should also avoid items like onions, garlic, and mushrooms. 2, no intoxications, including liquor, tea, coffee, tobacco in any form, betel nuts, pan, and pan masala. So masala is spices made with betel. 3, no illicit sex, which means no sex outside of marriage, and ideally no sex within marriage that is not for procreation. And 4, no gambling, including speculation on the stock market or in business deals, lotteries and lotto games, etc. Devotees should also avoid watching commercial films, television and non-devotional videos, reading novels and other non-devotional works, reading magazines that deal with films, sports, politics, sex, social affairs, etc. Such activities will simply contaminate our consciousness and encourage us to violate the 4 regulative principles. Yeah, important points. So, although Srila Prabhupada gave us, 4 regulative principles to avoid these, but you may think, oh, that's easy. But actually, it's to follow strictly, then there's a little deeper than that. Actually, it's a lot deeper than that. Watching commercial films, television, and non-devotional videos and so on. Reading novels and other non-devotional works, because all these outside of Krishna conscious literature, outside of Krishna conscious literature or Krishna conscious films and so on, then everything is at least mixed, if at best is just mixed with material things, material desires, material activities, and people in general are very much affected by any kind of association. So one form of association, wrong association, is becoming affected by things that we would see or read in that are not related to Krishna. Now, of course, sometimes for the sake of going to school or the sake of our work, we sometimes can't avoid these things. But in our own private life, we should try our best to avoid reading things like this or associating with this other kind of news media as far as possible. Unless there's some way that we can use it, and we know how we're going to use that in the Lord's service. Associating with devotees. One must associate with devotees regularly. Regularly means as often as possible within our current life situation. The more one associates with sincere devotees, the faster progress one will make in Krishna consciousness. Satsanga does not mean that the devotees simply gather together physically. What is done in the association is important. The basis for satsanga is sankirtan, Krishna katha, and seva. Seva means devotional service. Prajalpa, mundane talk, should be avoided. So, if we're gathering together with our friends who may be also practicing Krishna consciousness, but but in that association with our practicing devotee friends who are practicing Krishna consciousness, if our discussions are just go into mundane politics or just material things, then it's not much different than the associating with non-devotees. The benefit of associating with devotees, staying in the devotee association, the benefit is that everyone should be helping each other, reminding each other by our activities to remember Krishna, to serve Krishna. Bhagavad Gita says how devotees get great pleasure and bliss by associating with and discussing the Supreme Lord. And so this is actually the benefit of the association, real, proper association with devotees. Okay. This is so if we are just associating to talk about material things, then it's like associating with non-devotees. So we should, for our own benefit and for the benefit of others who are on the path of Krishna consciousness, we should make a point to associate in a Krishna conscious way. And anyone can see, if we actually come together and we sit down and we have discussion of a Krishna conscious discussion, read Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, and have our questions and answers back and forth, our discussions which is all about Krishna and devotional service. That is actually the most pleasing and most beneficial, and it's the most pleasing to the soul, and it is the most, and by that association with devotees and service to the devotees and hearing regularly topics like this Srimad Bhagavatam, these activities are what we what's required of us, so that we can become um, uh, detached from the material entanglement. Srila Prabhupada says that it may seem that just by association of devotees and studying Srimad Bhagavatam, we can become Krishna conscious and go back to Godhead. He says it may seem that this is, how is this possible? But he says it is a fact. By association of devotees, we will, and association, proper association with the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, by hearing and chanting it and taking and trying to understand it and trying to understand how to apply it to our lives. If we can do these things, then that is exactly the key to becoming fully Krishna conscious within this lifetime, if we take it seriously. Okay. D. One should humble oneself in satsanga to submissively hear, and one should not be eager to simply speak. Well, that's another point. Maybe someone might feel like, hey, I'm really good. I'm better than everyone else. I'm more knowledgeable. So therefore, I should speak, and everyone else should just hear from me. Of course, naturally, if you're more senior, probably would be in that position anyway. But sometimes we're in the association of many others who are also qualified to speak. So one should be in a humble position, so that whether you get the opportunity to speak, say giving a Srimad Bhagavatam class or Bhagavad Gita class, or you're in the position to hear from others who are speaking this knowledge according to their realizations. Either way, it is beneficial. E. Association of devotees is our most prized possession, without which our life becomes dry and meaningless. One is sure to drift from Krishna consciousness if one does not regularly associate. Well, Srila Prabhupada has certainly emphasized that so much. I always tell these stories. One devotee I know from way back, during the movement around the time I joined, he asked Srila Prabhupada, because he was always struggling with an association of devotees, and he was telling Srila Prabhupada that he says, Srila Prabhupada, sometimes the association of devotees becomes intolerable. What should I do? And of course, he was expecting that Srila Prabhupada would say, oh, if the association of devotees is intolerable, then just go off on your own and practice Krishna consciousness without being bothered by the association of devotees. But Srila Prabhupada says even if the association of devotees is intolerable, you must tolerate it and stay in that association and practice Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada, another famous statement for Srila Prabhupada, if one thinks that one can become Krishna conscious outside of the association of devotees, he is living, if he's thinking like that, he is living in an hallucination. So Srila Prabhupada has made it very, very clear that it is absolutely impossible on the path of Krishna consciousness to become Krishna conscious without associating with devotees. When one becomes fully Krishna conscious, then it's not as required, because you're fully Krishna conscious, you're with Krishna all the time. And Krishna is always surrounded by his pure devotees, his eternal. But for us who are practicing, we have to be regularly associating with others who are on the path. We have to be. F. Association may be in person, vapu, for example, in the physical presence of the Guru and the Vaishnavas, or in words, vani, for example, hearing and following the instructions of the Guru and the Vaishnavas. Both are important. So vani and vapu, these are very important terms. They definitely come up in for those who are taking the ISKCON Disciples course. There's a section on that, vani and vapu. So just like in the association of one's spiritual master, it's very unlikely. Some devotees get this opportunity, but in general, if a guru has many disciples, and he's probably traveling a lot, so it's not practical to be physically with the spiritual master. For most disciples, it is simply not possible. It's like Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada was traveling constantly all over the world, the jet age Swami, he called him. He was traveling all over the world to practice, not to practice Krishna consciousness, but to preach Krishna consciousness. And he would not stay in any one place more than 2 or 3 days, sometimes longer. But during that time that he was in a place, devotees would come and see him. They would come and see him and hear from him. But most of the time, the association was through Vani. Vani means, okay, spiritual masters come through, but he's given instructions. Maybe he gave some specific instructions when he came through and you saw him, but in general, there's instructions. Chant 16 rounds, follow the 4 Eagle principles, stay in association of devotees, and depending on who the devotee is, Srila Prabhupada maybe gave many different instructions on how to manage a temple, for example, or about deity worship, and sometimes related to health. Srila Prabhupada was very, very personal with his devotees. If he knew that someone was having some problem or some health problem, sometimes he would even suggest, he would write a nice letter saying, okay, so-and-so has this problem, make sure she tries this remedy and tries that remedy, that will help. Do not overeat, and do not sleep too much, sleep too little. Different kinds of instructions. So Srila Prabhupada gave many instructions on different levels. But in general, the Vani aspect of association is most important. The Vani aspect is most important, more important than Vapu. Because Vapu, you see the Guru or you see the other devotees when you see them, but if you learn something or there's some instruction, then following that instruction is eternal. Just like Srila Prabhupada tells always how he had his association. He actually only physically was with his spiritual master 4 or 5 times in his whole lifetime. Because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was constantly traveling, and Srila Prabhupada had he was traveling too. He had his activities as a grihasta he was doing what he did to make some money and take care of family. So he very rarely got a chance to directly be with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. But he tells how ever since that first meeting, that famous meeting when Srila Prabhupada was pulled into the association of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta by one of his good friends, and his Srila Bhaktisiddhanta immediately looked at him and immediately said, "Oh, you are an intelligent young man. Why don't you preach the cult of Lord Chaitanya?" And Srila Prabhupada, although he was shocked to hear that, he was actually very happy because his family line was following Lord Chaitanya. And here's an actual sadhu who was giving that instruction. So Srila Prabhupada didn't have much, vapu or physical association with the spiritual master. Just a few times he was with him, but from that very meeting, he was already thinking how he could, throughout his life, even in his married life, how he could follow that instruction of preaching specifically to the English-speaking people, because Srila Prabhupada could speak English better than most people that were around him at that time. So he followed that instruction and continued to follow that instruction. Once Srila Prabhupada told of one godbrother, I don't know the name, the name doesn't matter, but there was one of his godbrothers, who like 30 years or 35 years after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had departed from this world, and this godbrother wrote a book, and he said, because I was so much grieving for the loss of our spiritual master, it took me 35 years to finally write a book, preaching Krishna consciousness. But Srila Prabhupada criticized this attitude. And Srila Prabhupada says, I've never been separate from my spiritual master, because I've been following his instructions from the beginning. I'm following his instructions, so I'm associating with him through Vani. And of course, Srila Prabhupada had written already, by that point, he had already written so many books. Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, and so on like that. He had written so many translations and commentaries, purports on these books, all following the instructions of his spiritual master, even long after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was physically not present. So Vani and Vapu. Vani is more important because that is eternal. Vapu is good when you have it, but it is not it's temporary. G. Satsanga will be meaningful. Satsanga means the association of the devotees. Will be meaningful when one tries sincerely to practice in one's life what one has carefully heard. One should accept a counselor who can be a friend and a guide. So, yes, we like I said, we need to associate with devotees. But association with devotees, we're associating on different levels. We associate with devotees. We associate with senior devotees. We associate with devotees who are more or less on our level, and we associate with devotees who are more beginners than we are. So, in this case, the advice here is association of devotee means associating with those who are senior, who can give us, who can guide us. That means like Shiksha Guru, who could be or could become Diksha Guru, but you're associating with those devotees, senior devotees who you can talk to, you can ask their guidance, and instructions on how to practice Krishna consciousness. That kind of association is very important. And the other kinds of association, which I don't know if it's listed here. Let's see. Other kinds of association. We also have devotees that are more or less on our level, that the friends. We're practicing Krishna consciousness. You can associate with devotees in a certain way that you may not be able to associate with your guru or your senior devotees in that way. And basically, each other, you're encouraging each other in devotional service. That's the idea. Not that you sit together and just talk about all kinds of mundane topics and criticizing devotees. That kind of association is detrimental. It's not helpful. in becoming Krishna conscious. And then one should minimize, in as much under avoiding non-devotees, in as much as satsanga is required for maintaining a vibrant spiritual life, avoiding asatsanga means association of non-devotees. For example, association of non-devotees is equally important. So we associate with those who are practicing Krishna consciousness, and we try to not become too intimate with those who are not practicing Krishna consciousness. One should minimize association with non-devotees as much as such association contaminates our consciousness. So if we know someone and they're not practicing Krishna consciousness and they're engaged in non-devotional activities, illicit sex, intoxication, and so on like that. If those are things that are important to them, they're naturally going to talk about those kind of things. They're going to talk, and if we get in discussions about those things, unless we're kind of strong in Krishna consciousness, and we are preaching on the basis of their what they're saying, but if we just enjoy associating like that, or we enjoy just going out and and intimately associating with people who are not on the path of Krishna consciousness, then that association will actually be detrimental to our spiritual life. Of course, if we're living in a material society, and most people are not around us, are not devotees, are not practicing, not on the path of Krishna consciousness. Most people are not on that path of Krishna consciousness. So we do. If we're working, we got to associate with people, most likely who are not devotees and so on. It has to be there, but you don't have to intimately associate. You don't. If someone's talking about their, I got this. He's got his brand new beautiful car or the brand new beautiful house, and start talking about all their material things. And if one who's practicing Krishna consciousness starts contemplating these kind of topics in the because of that association, then it leads, one thing leads to another. It starts off with we hear, and then we contemplate. There's some verses in the Bhagavad Gita. While contemplating the objects of the senses, one develops attachment for them. By that attachment, lust arises. Lust, anger. From anger, bewilderment of memory. And when the memory becomes bewildered, the intelligence is lost. So and also, and that process of contemplating to memory, the intelligence being lost, it's not that it has to go on for, long time, for weeks, for years, and then gradually it just catches up with us. It can happen very quickly if we're not very vigilant. So if we start contemplating something, some material enjoyment, contemplating means you're not just that it came to your mind, but you start thinking to yourself, that would be nice. How can I justify doing this and say that it's a Krishna conscious activity? How can I do that? How can I go out and maybe follow the four regulative principles, or not follow all the principles, and and somehow justify that so that it's, you know, that it's still called a Krishna conscious activity. Anyway, these things go on. Our mind is always struggling with these kind of activities. So, how do uh, we by by good association of devotees who are serious about Krishna consciousness, then we can help save ourselves from a lot of this kind of problem. Because the end result of that contemplation is what? Memory becomes bewildered, we forget Krishna, and our intelligence is lost, and the next step is we can actually fall down into the lower species of life, take another birth not even in a human species. And it all starts with that contemplation, and that contemplation uh, can be started very quickly by um, intimately associating with those who are not on the Krishna conscious path. So that's why these principles they're there. Okay, going on. C, one should associate with non-devotees only to the barest minimum extent for one, fulfilling professional or business duties; two, fulfilling basic social obligations, for example, for immediate relatives, neighbors, colleagues, etc. So again, if you're associating with non-devotees, uh, if you're a devotee, you're a devotee practicing Krishna consciousness, and you have to associate with non-devotees, our minimum uh, our minimum, how do you say, where you draw the line, that is, definitely we cannot break regulative principles, even in the name of business. I remember one person who was practicing, well, I'm not sure how much he was practicing, but he knew the standard, knew the regulative principles. But he was saying that because he had to go out to dinner with people to get clients for his particular business, and usually he had to go to where they wanted to go, and there was really no vegetarian food there. This was years ago, but maybe there was not. So he was saying how, okay, so for my business purposes, I have to go there and I have to eat things which I would normally not eat. But of course, that's very degrading, meat and liquor and these things, just to be social so that you can do your business. So in the association of, if we need to associate with non-devotees, if we're practicing Krishna consciousness ourselves and we need to associate with non-devotees, then if the question comes up, there's you got to go somewhere, you got to eat something with them. Then you have to draw the line. Hey, I am vegetarian. I can go with you, but if there's nothing suitable in there, then I'm not going to take anything. I'm not going to break I'm not going to give up. I'm going to eat meat, or fish, or eggs, or take intoxication just to get your business. And of course, if you do like that strictly, some people will actually appreciate that. They may not be able to follow themselves, but they will appreciate here's somebody who can actually do what I wish I could do, but I can't do it because I can't control my senses. So some people actually will appreciate that. So this is what it means to avoid association of non-devotees. And number two, fulfilling basic social obligations, for example, immediate relatives, neighbors, colleagues, etc. So yes, we have neighbors. If our neighbors are not devotees, we've got family members who may not be devotees. Colleagues, people we work with, may also not be devotees. So you associate them as much as you need to, but don't give up regulative principles. Don't give up your real goal in life. Just superficially, you you associate superficially for the purpose of the business or the whatever contact you have to have with them. But in general, minimize it and try to maximize on the association of devotees instead of non-devotees. Some important quotes. The Bhagavatam says that by such association, one loses all good qualities, such as truthfulness, cleanliness, mercy, gravity, intelligence, etc., and all opulences that are automatically obtained by a devotee. A man is never so degraded as when he comes into such unholy association. So this is in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a quote from Srimad Bhagavatam. I don't know exactly where we could find it if it was necessary later on. But the association of non-devotees, our good qualities will become lost by that association, because we are all affected by association. It's just like you put a crystal under a light, then that crystal is going to reflect that light. So if we associate with people who are not, if we associate with anyone we associate with, we're going to be affected by that association. We're always affected. Only until we become 100% Krishna conscious, and then there's no question of any degradation. So here the unnecessary association of non-devotees is very much encouraged. The avoiding the association of non-devotees as far as possible is to try to follow that. Lord Chaitanya says, quoting scripture, and this is quote we find in the Nectar of Devotion actually, that one should rather be locked in a cage with fire than to associate with non-devotees. Now, of course, no one wants to be locked in a cage and surrounded by fire. That would be a very dangerous and scary situation. But the point is that one should rather that than to be associate with non-devotees. One should rather that, because the association. Because if you're in a cage surrounded by fire, of course you get burnt. You may die. But if you're in association of non-devotees and are affected by that association, then that is much more dangerous. So one who's interested and desires to become Krishna conscious, one should try to avoid, as far as possible, that association. Okay, another topic here: reading. Devotees should daily read the books of Srila Prabhupada. For example, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, etc. One may begin with the smaller books like the Nectar of Instruction, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, Krishna Consciousness, and Matchless Gift. These are very small books. But we concentrate on Srila Prabhupada's books. And here we're saying other books should be avoided. Like I said before, avoid the novels and other things that are not related to Krishna. That's the principle here. We should and by the study of these particular books, the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavad Gita is non-different from Krishna. It's Krishna's words directly. this is unusual. Almost every Krishna is God, and Krishna directly spoke. God actually directly spoke the words of Bhagavad Gita. So usually we have, we have in Islam, we have Prophet Muhammad received certain knowledge from God, and he wrote it or had somebody else write it. Actually, he was illiterate, so he would speak the knowledge, and somebody else would write it down. But in Christianity, there's so many things that are written, but directly from God Himself. No, and so on like that. So Bhagavad Gita is very special in that it is directly spoken by God. And Bhagavad Gita, as it is, Srila Prabhupada's translations and purports of the Bhagavad Gita are especially special because by studying that Bhagavad Gita as it is, and it's not just studying, but studying and trying to follow the instructions in it, then we can become Krishna conscious. Same thing with the Srimad Bhagavatam. If we study it, Srila Prabhupada says that the Srimad Bhagavatam, if we study the Srimad Bhagavatam from the beginning, verse by verse, purport by purport, and we try to apply what we're learning in it to our lives, then by the time we finish the 9th canto, then we will become, he says, self-realized souls, or God-realized souls, I think is the word. So we can become fully Krishna conscious. There's not to read it. Don't read the Srimad Bhagavatam like a novel. It's just skimming through it and skipping here and skipping there and seeing what the final, who the murderer was or whatever the novel was about. You study Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is written in a certain order. It's not all chronological order. If you actually go through the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam to the end, you'll see that there are many histories. Because the Srimad Bhagavatam is a Purana. It's a Purana, Bhagavad Purana. So there's a history, and so the history, or many histories that are within the Srimad Bhagavatam, didn't necessarily all happen. For sure, they did not all happen in that order that we read them. They happen different times, different places, different planets, sometimes different creations of the material world that's in there, and it's put together in a particular way. Srila Vyasadeva compiled it in a certain way, not the chronological order, although certain parts will be chronological, but not necessarily chronological, and more for the order that is favorable for hearing what you need to hear first, what you need to hear second, to help you become Krishna conscious. So these books are very, very important, and this is also association with Spirit Srila Prabhupada, who has written the purports for it. So sometimes today we'll think, oh, if only I was here, I could have been initiated directly by Srila Prabhupada, like that. We think like that, but we get initiation. Yeah, that may be true, but it's the association of Srila Prabhupada. You get Srila Prabhupada says he described that his books, his purports, were his early morning ecstasies. It's an expression of his early morning ecstasies. So Srila Prabhupada was, totally absorbed in Krishna, and he was writing these books. In fact, Srila Prabhupada said, actually, I'm not writing these books. Krishna is actually dictating them. I'm just simply repeating what he is saying, like that. So we can see why these books are so special. And this is our last slide here. C, reading must be done in a serious, attentive, and systematic way and not casually like one would read a novel. Well, I just said that. It is advisable to take notes as one reads and to memorize important shlokas. Yes. So if we're reading, if we're actually read it, we read for the purpose of studying, not just to pass the time, not just as an entertainment like we read a novel, but we read it for the purpose of learning, studying, and teaching. If we study, at least when I'm reading something, reading Srila Prabhupada's books, I'm thinking of how to turn it into a class, a course to teach the subject. So like that, because the best way of learning is by teaching. So if you study with the purpose of understanding it, so that you can give this knowledge to others, that's actually the best way. D, reading is necessary to improve our philosophical understanding. It strengthens our conviction, faith, and determination. So this reading, especially Srila Prabhupada's books, we study them. This is our philosophy. In Krishna consciousness, we have something which is you don't really find in other religious paths. We have religion and we have philosophy. Religion means, there's a belief in God. Okay, God said this, God wants you to do that. That's there. But then you have philosophy that explains why. Why is it this? Why is it that? And that philosophy is very important because if you have if you have a religion, there's so many rules and regulations, and God said this and God said that, and therefore you must follow it. But you don't really understand why that you have to follow it. You don't really understand how to practically apply it towards life. Just like in the outside of Krishna consciousness, and well, hopefully not too much inside. Outside, there's questions like abortion. Is abortion okay? Woman it's her body. She has the right to decide. Doesn't really matter. There's no life there until the 7th month, or different things that are thrown out there. And so people do these things because they have their whatever they base it on. But philosophically, we understand from Srimad Bhagavatam that from the first moment that the child is conceived, there's life from the very, and so therefore, abortion there's no question. This is just one example, but there's no question of doing it because life is there from the beginning, and there's also no question of contraceptives preventing someone from becoming pregnant, because that's just like saying, okay, you move into this apartment here, but I'm going to destroy the apartment before you get there, so that it's not actually livable. So that's what contraceptives do. So, but without the philosophical understanding of why we do what we do, like why we follow the regulative principles that we follow, then without that philosophical understanding, then it's very difficult to go forward in Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada says he says, and then he quoted this from his spiritual master, the religion without philosophy is sentiment and sometimes becomes fanaticism. And philosophy without religion is simply mental speculation. And what that means is, if you're just following my Bible or my Quran or my Torah, these books, they say do this, 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 and this, and therefore I need to follow this, but because God said it, okay. But if you don't understand philosophically why the actual reason behind that, it becomes very difficult to follow sometimes. And then on the other side, if you don't have religion, which means there's no God, there's no religion, belief in God, but you're trying to figure out philosophy, you try to figure out, analyze things in a philosophical way, but the conclusion is not God, then that's just mental speculation. That's also useless. So you need philosophy that supports the reasons that we follow the religious path. This is the principle here, and we get that from reading these kind of Krishna conscious literatures. So reading is important for a preacher. Same reason. Not only do we practice Krishna consciousness, but we need to understand the philosophy very, very well so that we can teach it to others. And reading is also hearing. So we talk about Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, hearing, chanting, remembering, like that. So hearing doesn't just mean hearing with our ears. Hearing means also reading Krishna conscious literature. This is the principle. So maybe we don't have time, or we can't always be there and actually hear a class. Well, of course, now these days, everything's available on the internet, so you can hear somebody. You can have 10 Srimad Bhagavatam classes in the morning from all over the world. But suppose we didn't have that, and there's no way to directly hear, but reading is also hearing. It satisfies that principle of hearing also means that you're reading. And chanting japa, by the way, is also a form of remembering. It comes up a number of times. You're hearing, you're chanting, and you're hearing, but you're also remembering Krishna by chanting japa. We mentioned that last week. So this is all I have here as far as my presentation. Are there any questions here or those who are watching online? No here? Anyone online? Type your question in if you have one. Okay, I'm not seeing anything coming in. So if there are no questions, and it's been an hour already we've been speaking, so we'll end here. Who didn't hear who came in late, next class, which will be the last class, this is number 7, so the next one will be number 8, week 8. It will not be next Wednesday, that's Lord Balaram's appearance day. And the week after that is Janmashtami. I'm not sure if it's a Wednesday, but it's around that time. There's no possibility of a class on that day. So probably the week after that, we will have our number 8 class on the Vaisnava Etiquette course. And those who are actually taking the course, who have actually signed up for it and who are going in, you can take the quizzes. So several devotees have been taking it. There are about 8 devotees that have been taking the quizzes every week. So you take the quizzes. If you finish all the quizzes, you pass them, which I think is not too difficult to pass if you actually take the quiz. Then I will give you, upon completing them, I'll give you a certificate saying that you've taken this course and you've completed it. So if there's no questions, we'll end here. Thank you very much for everyone who came. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Thank you.